So did you know that 20 to about 35% of your psychological therapy clients are likely to be autistic, and many of those will be undiagnosed? Now, when questioned, many psychological therapists didn't even realize that they had autistic clients, and about 86% felt that they didn't have the training or understanding to work with autistic clients. Prevalence of mental health challenges among autistic people is significantly higher than among the general population. So that's why most psychological therapists are far more likely to see autistic clients in their practice than they perhaps realize. But there is a quick 10-minute test that you can do that's available online, which you can guide a client through that would give you an indicator of whether they may be autistic or not. So, the reasons where perhaps you might want to do this test with a client are where perhaps you identify that you're beginning to suspect that they might be autistic, and that autism may be behind some of the challenges that they're facing. So perhaps they're struggling with relationship problems, maybe they're struggling with certain social communication problems, whether that's in work or whether it's trying to form friendships, whatever it happens to be. It could be that you identify that this person just isn't responding to therapy in quite the same way, and so you start suspecting maybe they're autistic, and you then address with them the fact that you think they could possibly be autistic. Have they ever considered that? Sometimes they might say yes, they are, and they maybe have a diagnosis. They just didn't feel that was relevant specifically to therapy, and so they hadn't mentioned it because you'd never asked. But other people may say that they had never really thought about this. They don't really know much about autism, and so you can then explain a little bit about autism. So I obviously recommend that all therapists learn something about autism, some of the signs of people being autistic, and the impact that an autistic kind of neurology can influence how someone presents and interacts with the world around them. So, autism is far more prevalent than people necessarily think. Going back just a few decades, it was felt that perhaps 1 in 10,000 people were autistic. Now it is as high as perhaps 1 in 44, depending on the study that you look at. The average that people say is probably close-ish to 1 in 100 or so. But it really does depend. So there's been an uptick in people being diagnosed as autistic, where you've suddenly got all these undiagnosed autistic adults, perhaps having newly diagnosed autistic children, and they're suddenly thinking, oh, maybe I'm autistic as well. And so they're then seeking diagnosis and being diagnosed as autistic, and so they can get the appropriate support for them in their life. There's also been a huge kind of block on accepting that females can be autistic within the professional community, and so now all of a sudden there's more awareness around the way autism presents within females, and the way that sometimes it's hidden within females more so than within males. And so that has led to an enormous jump in how many females are being diagnosed autistic. So with autism's prevalence, it's definitely worth every therapist learning something about autism and just familiarizing yourself with it, because it does totally change how you might help that individual in relation to treating them for, say, depression, anxiety, or addictions, or struggling with food, or whatever it happens to be. So I'm going to take you through the test, and I'll use myself as, I'll answer the questions on this test so that you can see what the questions are and you can see how quickly it takes to do this test. This doesn't mean that the person is definitely autistic when they score on this test, but it is definitely a very quick and simple test to do, and it's on the internet, it's readily available. So you could do it perhaps just opening it up on your mobile phone and guiding a client through it, or on a laptop or a tablet or something. It's something that you could do as part of a session fairly quickly that might help that potentially autistic client to identify that they could be autistic within themselves if maybe they haven't done previously, or confirm that they could be autistic if they have identified within themselves previously that they think they might be. So, for example, with myself, for years and years and years, I thought I might be autistic, and I had just never wanted to self-diagnose. So I tried to keep myself quiet on that, and I only really told friends and family. I didn't want to publicly say, I think I'm autistic. I would just describe myself to others and say, I struggle and have these certain traits about me. But I never wanted to label those traits until I'd received a diagnosis. So if it does turn out that the client may well be autistic, obviously you're unlikely to be the person who's in a position to do the diagnosing. So what you would then do is look at how you can support them if they want to seek diagnosis through that process. So I definitely think it's worth learning about the process of how someone goes about getting an autism diagnosis, so that you can kind of help them through that a little bit and direct them to the right channels for what they need to do. So the autism test can be found at psychology-tools.com/test/autism-spectrum-quotient. And so that is what I'm going to just guide you through now, and I'll answer the questions, and that way you'll see what the sort of questions are and how quick this is to do with a client. So this is the autism spectrum quotient test, and I'm just going to run through it now, answering it as I would give the answers. So question number 1, I prefer to do things with others rather than on my own. Well, I definitely disagree with that. I prefer to do things on my own as far as possible. I prefer to do things the same way over and over again. I obviously definitely agree with that. I always try and do things the same way over and over again. I like to have a structure and everything to be identical repeatedly. If I try to imagine something, I find it very easy to create a picture in my mind. Well, I definitely don't. I pretty much just see black in my mind's eye. I frequently get so strongly absorbed in one thing that I lose sight of other things. Most definitely. I would not eat and sometimes not wash or anything if I'm so focused on a task I'm doing. I often notice small sounds when others do not. Yes, again, very definitely. I notice ridiculously small details. I usually notice car number plates or similar strings of information. Again, definitely. I'm constantly reciting, sometimes out loud, but definitely kind of mumbling or doing it to myself when I see car number plates, and especially if I see patterns within them. Other people frequently tell me that what I've said is impolite, even though I think it's polite. Yes, definitely. It's one thing that makes it very difficult also with responding to things like YouTube comments and other comments that I get, because I want to answer the comments, and yet sometimes I've just answered the comment as I thought the answer would be, and then I've had someone accuse me of having a bad attitude, and I've thought, well, I just literally answered your question. I didn't have any attitude one way or the other. When I'm reading a story, I can easily imagine what the characters might look like. Most definitely no. I'm fascinated by dates. I am, but not amazingly fascinated. But I do find dates incredibly interesting. In a social group, I can easily keep track of several different people's conversations, as you might imagine. That's definitely a hard no. I find social situations easy, likewise a hard no. I tend to notice details that others do not. That is most definitely true. I'd rather go to a library than to a party, obviously. Who wouldn't? I find making up stories easy. I find it ridiculously difficult, but I'm not going to go to that extreme because I've learned some skills to kind of compensate, to sort of find logical ways of creating stories. I find myself drawn more strongly to people than things, most definitely not things all the time. Ideally, animals, actually, so not things as in objects, particularly. I tend to have very strong interests, which I get upset about if I can't pursue. Most definitely, yes, I end up stropping and sulking. I enjoy social chit chat, obviously not. Absolutely no way. If I can avoid it, I would. When I talk, it isn't always easy for others to get a word in edgeways. Most definitely true. I'm fascinated by numbers. I am. It's not the most fascinating thing that I've had, but I do really like numbers, especially patterns of numbers. When I'm reading a story, I find it difficult to work out the character's intentions. Yes, I have no idea what the character's intentions are, and when people add lots of intention-y stuff, it really annoys me. I just want a ABC kind of story. I don't particularly enjoy reading fiction. Definitely accurate. I pretty much don't read any fiction. I really, really hate fiction generally for various reasons. I find it hard to make new friends. Definitely. I find it very, very hard and pretty much don't. And then I find it hard to understand what a friend is as well, obviously. I notice patterns in things all the time, most definitely. I'd rather go to the theatre than to a museum. No, I'd rather go to the quiet museum. Doesn't mean I don't like some shows or plays or things, but given the choice, I'd rather be in a quiet museum and learning knowledge than a play. It doesn't upset me if my daily routine is disturbed. No, it most definitely very much upsets me and it ruins my whole day. I frequently find that I don't know how to keep a conversation going. Yep, I just end up talking at people because I don't know what I'm doing. I find it easy to read between the lines when someone's talking to me. Most definitely not. I usually concentrate more on the whole picture rather than on the small details. No, I'm very good at noticing small details and then missing whatever the big picture was. I'm not very good at remembering phone numbers. I'd probably agree that that's true now, but that wasn't true prior to mobile phones. That phone numbers generally were easy to remember when you used to just have to remember them. But with the advent of mobile phones, it's not. So you just remember the string of patterns, the pattern of numbers. I don't usually notice small changes in a situation or a person's appearance. This one's difficult to answer because I do notice small changes, but I don't necessarily know what I'm noticing. So, for example, my mum described an incident when I was very young where she washed her hair and put a towel around her hair on her head, and then I was maybe 2 or 3 or something, and I wouldn't stop crying because she looked different because she had this towel on her head. So until she removed the towel, I wouldn't stop crying. But I don't know if I would have known that was why I was upset. So I notice, but then at the same time, I don't notice if someone's changed the color of their hair. I know something's different about them. I feel kind of almost instinctively that something's different about the person, but I don't know what it is. So I'm going to say I don't usually notice small changes. Let's say slightly disagree because I do, but it's more nuanced. I don't normally know what I've noticed. I just know something's different. It's different when it's physical things. So if it was a book on a shelf that's moved, I would notice that and be able to say that book on that shelf has moved. Whereas when it's with people, I just have that sense that they look different in some way, but I can't picture why or can't figure out why. I know how to tell if someone listening to me is getting bored. Not particularly. Very unlikely I'm going to notice if someone's getting bored. I just carry on talking at the person. I find it easy to do more than one thing at once. Most definitely not. I have to focus all my attention on one task at a time. When I talk on the phone, I'm not sure when it's my turn to speak. Most definitely. I have absolutely no idea. It's horrendous. I enjoy doing things spontaneously. Of course, I don't enjoy spontaneity. I like everything planned, organised. I'm terrible with spontaneous things. I'm often the last to understand the point of a joke. I would say that is definitely true. I'm often last to understand the point of a joke, but not 100% true, because obviously I'm much older now, so there's jokes I kind of understand because of age and learning over the years. I find it easy to work out when someone is thinking or what someone is thinking or feeling just by looking at their face. Most definitely not, although I do study really hard to try and master that. If there's an interruption, I can switch back to what I was doing very quickly. Nope, it kind of ruins it for the rest of the day as a minimum if I'm interrupted. So I need absolutely no interruptions if I'm doing something. I'm good at social chit chat, most definitely not. People often tell me that I keep going on and on about the same thing, most definitely. Repeatedly, all the time. When I was young, I used to enjoy playing games involving pretending with other children. Most definitely not. I don't know why anyone would. I like to collect information about categories of things. Most definitely. As can be seen just by the amount I hoard and what ends up on camera behind me. I find it difficult to imagine what it would be like to be someone else. Most definitely. I find it difficult, yep. Just making sure that I'm getting the answer the right way round. I like to carefully plan any activities I participate in, most definitely. Ideally planning it right down to the last bit and exact timings and everything, no uncertainty in it. I enjoy social occasions, absolutely not. Would avoid them at all costs if I can. I find it difficult to work out people's intentions, most definitely. I have no idea about people's intentions most of the time. I also try to assume people mean what they say and their intentions are exactly what they've just said their intentions are. So it annoys me and I get really angry when people have a very different intention to what they told me they were having. New situations make me anxious, most definitely. I enjoy meeting new people, most definitely not. I try and avoid it. I'm a good diplomat, I would say, with all my therapy training and everything. I kind of am-ish, but sometimes I'm just very blunt and it's like, nope, just do this, I don't care kind of attitude. Make your own decisions. This is what I think, make your own decisions kind of thing. And so if I feel it's important to be a good diplomat, I'm better at it. If I'm just thrust into the situation, I'm likely to not really care one way or the other, and the situation is what it is. I'm not very good at remembering people's dates of birth. I would say that I agree with that. Although in the past, again, pre-mobile phones and things where you would manually by hand write it down into a diary or something and you'd see it written down, then I'd be better at remembering, but nowadays I'm not. Unless it's my wife, essentially. I find it very easy to play games with children that involve pretending. Most definitely not. Right, so let's see what my answers are. 47 out of 50. So if you score 33 in the 33 to 50 range, it indicates significant autistic traits, which means that there's obviously a good chance that you could be autistic. So when you actually go for an autism diagnosis, this alone isn't all they do. They do something very similar to this. So they guide you through, or they normally they'll send you beforehand. I think I was sent 3 questionnaires, 2 multiple choice questionnaires. One of them was very similar to this questionnaire. Another questionnaire, I can't remember exactly what it was. I might cover my own questionnaire. I've got copies of them, so I might cover my own questionnaires at some point. But the other questionnaire, I think, was about lifestyle or something. I can't remember. So they've got 2 questionnaires that are multiple choice and 1 questionnaire where you give long form answers. And so I'd answered those 3 questionnaires. On the ones that were multiple choice, similar to as I just talked through here, I would give my opinions. I would add caveats and I'd say, well, that's not 100% kind of, it's not as black and white as that question states, because sometimes, so this is more about the traits, almost like what people see, not exclusively that, but there's some questions where I might do something and be okay at doing it, but that's because I've practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced, and I'm following a script that I'm doing, and I feel that I'm not too bad at doing that script. So where it says I'm able to do something, for some of those, it's like, well, yeah, I'm able to do that, but I'm literally following a script that I've taught myself across many, many, many years to actually do. And so I then kind of wrote that in the sort of margin, saying, this isn't as black and white as this is making out. I can do that, but this is the sort of caveat to my answer. So that was just what I did, because, or else I felt that I was almost being pressured into answering something in a way that didn't match my actual belief about my experience. So I wanted to make it clear right up front on all the paperwork. So you do the 3 questionnaires, and then you go to your session, and obviously the psychologist or psychiatrist who's doing the assessment will have gone through all of those and maybe taken notes or made some level of decision about things of the sort of person that's coming in to see them. And then they'll ask you further questions, and they'll ask you questions from across all of the different forms, but in a conversational kind of way, obviously to see that your answers, essentially face to face in a conversation, match up with all your answers that you've given on your various questionnaires, and also to obviously deepen their understanding about you and to find actual examples from you of different situations. So this specific questionnaire can hint at, yes, you seem to show a very high level of autistic traits, or no, you don't show that higher level of autistic traits, but there's a lot more to it. So, but as a therapist in just normal everyday therapy practice, where you're working with psychological issues that people present, this is a very good place to start, I think, if you're just working one-to-one with someone and you're not an autism specialist or anything, but as part of the session, the client's perhaps curious about whether they could be autistic, and it's come up in your conversations, and so they agree, yeah, let's do this questionnaire, and let's just see where I stand. Let's see what happens, like how I fare on this test. So I hope you found this interesting, and I hope that this helps you in your therapeutic practice. There's a link to this test in the description, and obviously I post frequent videos on this channel to try and help therapists to do better, more effective therapy with their clients. So I hope to see you in future videos. So if you're interested in learning more about autism, you can check out my autism books. I've got 4 books that are part of the An Autistic Perspective series, and I've got an autobiography. So my autism books are An Autistic Perspective, working with autistic clients in counselling and psychotherapy. An Autistic Perspective, tips for autistic individuals and others in their lives. An autistic perspective, death, dying and loss, where the loss part goes into more than just loss of a loved one. It talks about loss of routines, loss of, like when you transition from primary school to secondary school to the world of work, when you transition from living at home into independent living. All of that involves loss. So it talks about the impact of loss and the way an autistic brain can process loss. An autistic perspective, parenting autistic children and teens, which shares information based on my years of working in children's homes, as well as my experience of working with children and parents, going in one-to-one, working with them, and obviously my personal knowledge and experience as being an autistic individual. And then you've got Look Into My Eyes, Autism, Hypnosis and Me, which is my autobiography through the lens of autism, where I share my experiences from birth up to adulthood of the challenges, the strengths, the weaknesses, the problems I've faced. And my wife also kindly wrote a chapter about her experience of being in a relationship with someone who is autistic. So if you're curious and keen to learn more about autism, these books are a good place that you can start to learn that, and there'll be a link in the description below where you can find the books.